Good evening, everyone. I do apologize. I believe I am late. So yes, I'm so sorry for that. I do apologize. So yeah, die Mailman. So Bernice, no, it wasn't that. I do apologize. I have people coming in, so I've got to go out perhaps later. So I had to start earlier. So that is entirely my fault, and I really do apologize. Yeah. So anyway, otherwise tomorrow would be unavailable and Sunday as well. So therefore it has to be now. So Pete, yeah. So yeah, sorry guys to keep everyone waiting. Roughly 20 minutes, I think it is. Actually, you know what? Let me do one thing. Because there's something I'd like. So yeah. Let me do this. Something I came across while going through the history of what happened during the Reformation. Something that becomes glaringly obvious. That's a little disturbing. Is that ask yourself during the whole period of the Muslim invasions of Europe, who was doing the fighting to push back the Muslims? And then you ask yourself, who was doing the propaganda that said, this is the punishment of the Lord against us wicked white Europeans. We've been bad Christians. We deserve to be invaded. So, everyone, go home, sit down, have a cup of hot chocolate and don't fight against those invading Muslims. Don't do that. Don't do it. Let them win. We deserve it. Let them win. So who was, shall we say, putting out propaganda to prevent the defense of Europe, and who was actually defending Europe? Well, the answer is the people who were fighting against the Muslim invasion to defend Europe was the Catholics, and the people saying that, maybe we should all just roll over and play dead, and we really deserve this, and we really should let the Muslims take over Europe, were the Protestants. And then you ask yourself, look at all the major battles. Look at all of the historically major battles where the Muslims were defeated, where eventually they were pushed out or defeated, and then ask yourself, who was fighting? Was it the brave Protestants, or was it the evil Catholics? And the answer is, generally speaking, the evil Catholics were fighting hard, sacrificing everything to defend Europe from invasion, while the brave Protestants were generally at home doing nothing, or they were putting out propaganda to say, those Catholics are evil. Those Catholics are so evil. Meanwhile, we really should let those Muslims take over Europe. Or here's the third part. They were generally involved in fighting on the side of the Muslims against the Catholics to help the Muslims destroy the Catholics and take over Europe. What am I to make of that? Yeah, good question. So, dude for Christ says, good evening, all Kafaroon, God bless. Yeah, so I should really adjust my my camera a little bit. Let me try. Oops. Yeah, anyway, fix that next time. So this is a serious question. Villainous says, so currently it's the Gnostics that are allowing Europe to be invaded by the Ummah. That is true, but here's the thing. Those very same, my issue is that historically speaking, the Protestants, when we go through that history, as we'll get to that, they were the ones who were aiding and abetting the European invasion. In many cases, they were collaborating with, profiting from, and actually fighting against their own so that the Muslims could win. And that is what do Protestants say? I mean, really, honestly, it's a fair question to ask. How do you explain your traitorous forebears collaborating with, profiting from, going out of their way to make sure that they stayed at home when it was important that they fight against the invasion of Europe? So When are you and Sam Shmoo get back together to do a duo? I don't know. Let Sam know I'd be interested. I'll reach out to him. Like I will reach out, but yeah. Let me see. Hi, everyone. So, okay, let's look at this. Now, there's something interesting here. I'm going to go back to this, but I will touch on this a little bit later. For instance, there is Hungarian Protestant, shall we say Lutheran, Imre Tăcăli, in resistance to the policies of the Habsburg, of the Habsburg Empire. He asked for, and then he obtained the military help of the Ottoman Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa, right, which led to the 1683 Ottoman attack on the Habsburg Empire and the Battle of Vienna. Now, Muslims keep asking, who opened the gates of Toledo? Now, first of all, that is a myth. It's a complete lie. The Jews did not open the gates of Toledo. That is a story that started decades later. There's no evidence that it ever happened. And at least according to the research I've done, I can't find any evidence that that is actually what happened. But of course, they get blamed. But then we need to ask, maybe we need to turn around and ask the Protestants, since this is a Protestant legacy, who opened the doors of Europe? Who let the Muslims into Europe? Who said the Muslims really deserve to win this one? We really should all just roll over the plate and let them. Well, the answer is the Protestants. The Protestant Christians opened the doors of Europe. They allowed the Muslims in, and then they decided to aid them because, you see, if Vienna fell, the Protestants would benefit at the destruction of the Catholic Habsburg Empire. And of course, the Muslims said, we'll give you guys a lot of money, give you some land and power. And they said, sure, we'll do it. No problem. Because, as we know, the Dutch were also saying, liever Turks than Pops. So in other words, rather Muslim than Catholic, because they really meant it. Okay, so any comments, any thoughts on that before I go on? So I just want to... So, Werner says it is easy to beat a divided enemy. It is true. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, yeah, so I just want to, okay. So I'll just briefly run through some of the last things I did. Right, so what we know is throughout the Reformation, alliances were forged between Protestants and the Ottomans, the Muslims and the Protestants. They worked together extensively, okay? There was a lot of collaboration. And so they were cooperating to help each other to defeat the Catholics because, as we'll see, Martin Luther was very much someone who was writing against the Catholics, said that the Catholics are evil, and what are we going to do about those Catholics? And he was quite serious about it. All right, we spoke of Ottoman alliances with the English. The English and the Dutch had a starring role in betraying Europe and actually aiding and abetting, assisting, even providing weapons, even providing technology, intelligence, and other things to those Muslims so that they could take over Europe. And of course, Queen Elizabeth was very much involved in the same process. Okay. And of course, as we've mentioned, your history class would have skipped all of this collaboration. Now, the Dutch. So let's go. So I'll do this slide and we'll take it from here. Let me see what have I missed. Nothing new under the sun is there. No. So you've got these collaborations. And of course, the Ottomans had made alliances with the Muslims, with the Protestants, because they said that they were very similar theologically. Now, why would they say that? They, of course, found that they both hated the Catholics, they both wanted to destroy the Catholics, and they both felt that if they could undermine the Catholics, they could then achieve their aims of survival of the ideology and so on and so on. And of course, they had already this viable relationship with the Muslims. So they were getting rich, they became naval powers and so on. And then, of course, they, so they sold out. And the Dutch, like the British, were driven by these commercial interests. Now, the Dutch, during their revolt, they looked for help from everybody, okay? Even a Turk, as I mentioned before. William of Orange said the Turks are very threatening, and of course, therefore they realized that the more that the Catholics are divided, fighting the Protestants here, then the Dutch, and then the Muslims there, that way they can't win very well, so they would each make advances playing leapfrog, and this was coordinated. This is not accidental. Okay, we spoke a little bit about Othello. Now, this kind of pro-Muslim propaganda was not isolated. This is something that was part and parcel of the culture. Okay, so the Reformation made it acceptable, as I mentioned, for there to be collaboration against your own. Okay, we've mentioned that the Dutch here were told to collaborate with the Moriscos, right? Which says that these Moriscos, these crypto-Muslims, were actually actively causing problems. They were being agents for the Muslim cause against the Christians. All right. So Calvino-Turkism, I've mentioned some of this, right? Actually, let me just continue from here. So the British author William Reynolds wrote a pamphlet entitled Calvino-Turkismus. Now, what I discovered is it wasn't just isolated to accusing the Calvinists of having a theology that was based on Islam. It's also the Anabaptists. So it was also called Anabaptismo-Turkismus. So there was a lot of knowledge that these ideas are actually very much Muslim aligned, right? Now, we've already discussed that you've got an alignment identified with Calvin's predestination that mirrors Islamic fatalism. Both deny free will. You've got Calvinist sola scriptura with Islamic reliance on the Quran. So the Bible only, the Quran only, rejecting church tradition. Okay, single sacred text as authority. Oops, typo. Islamic aniconism. And you've got contextual differences, but there are certainly parallels, because we know that the Islamic view of God and the Calvinist view of God are very, very similar. So Calvinist theology is shaped by interactions with the Ottoman Empire, right? You've got predestination, you've got very strict moral codes, you've got certain ideas that parallel that of the Muslims. Now, Protestant leaders, and the odd thing is that the more that I've dug into this, the more obvious all of this becomes, the more that you actually start to see articles like this. Let me just go back here. This is just one, but you can find dozens and dozens. You start to find the influence of Islam on the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century, right? The Protestant Reformation was a transformative period in Christian history. They saw in the emergence of figures like Martin Luther. But then, because I'm working with someone else who's also looked into this, and we're coming to converging conclusions, you had very close connection with the Muslim East. You had conversion to Islam in Eastern Europe, Eastern and Central Europe, the reaction of Christian reformers, the Protestant Reformation, Islamic resemblance. And yeah, let's just say the Muslims are claiming that, do you know that the Ottomans actually enabled the Reformation? Do you know that they actually caused that theology? Do you know the hand we had in creating an Islamized Christianity? Muslims are actually ranting about it. So it's just something that I think you need to be very, very aware of. So let me see. I preferio. So as an attendee of a Protestant church, I have serious problems with the violent start to Protestantism. Jesus didn't need to do this. Violent starts are associated with the adversary. Yeah. Okay, so you've got major economic impact, right? You've got heavy cultural exchange. So there were economic interactions between Calvinist influenced regions of the Ottoman Empire. You have trade routes, you have markets, right? You have intellectual and cultural exchanges, you had diplomatic relations, you had deep economic, cultural, intellectual, and diplomatic ties. You had transfer of people, you had transfer of goods. Remember, there was aiding and abetting the Islamic war machine by the Protestants. They were providing military technology, advisors, they were providing arms, and so on, right? Okay, so now, interesting enough, there's the ulama have long been seen. This is from the Encyclopedia of Islam. The ulama, this is the Muslim ulama, have long been seen as a very distinct group, a regulated and structured body, expressing the popular voice, constituting the solid framework of permanent government behind changing dynasties. This would be a deep state. This would be people's Illuminati that are operating behind governments. Why is the ulama being described as a permanent, invisible government behind changing dynasties, right? Just an interesting point. So this is where, so that's catching up, that's summarizing, that's providing a bit of information, but let's bring it all together. I think it's the last 30 slides. So, Sancta Turki, libera nos. Holy Turkey, liberate us. Who was saying that? Well, not the Catholics, I'll tell you that, oddly enough. So Ottoman policy intended to maintain political disunity in Europe in order to weaken the Habsburgs and prevent a new crusade. Now, don't forget, you can find numerous examples of Protestant diplomats, of Protestant leaders like Martin Luther saying, well, no, we don't need another crusade. No, that would be wrong. We need to let those Turks win, you bad white people, you. So he didn't want a crusade that could coalesce disparate forces of Europe. Ottoman intervention was a decisive factor in the rise of national monarchies, as in France, but also in the rise of Protestantism in Europe. He says, it wouldn't have been the Turks. This is a paper. Okay, this is called The Influence of the Ottoman Threat on the Protestant Reformation. This is a paper, it's a PhD paper, I believe, by a student at the university paper. And his English is not very good. Okay, his English is possible, but it's not great. But if it wasn't for the Turks, the Reformation would have most likely had the fate of the Albigensian uprising, right? And this is quoted in Kennesettan Lutheranism and the Turkish Peril, but that's the original paper back here. Okay, so this is a paper that actually has been quoted. The guy writes, because he could not simultaneously pursue two goals, the return of Protestants to the church and to drive out the Turks out of Europe, they dropped the crusade against the Ottomans. The Ottomans knew too well that when they encouraged Protestantism everywhere, forcing the Habsburg to divide their forces, the Turks and the Protestants of the 16th century were probably saving one another. This is quoted in André Clon, Suleiman the Magnificent, right? That's 2012. Daniel Goffman writes, and he's a very famous American scholar, right? A famous scholar in terms of the Ottoman Empire, Turkologist, claims that the major factor of the expansion of Lutheranism in Europe was the Ottoman menace, which directly encouraged Protestantism, as in northern Hungary and Transylvania, where Calvinism or Calvino-Turkism became the dominant religion. And this was called Calvino-Turkism for a reason. Supporting and protecting the Lutherans and the Calvinists against the Catholics was meant to be the cornerstone of Turkish policy in Europe. That's Daniel Goffman, Ottoman and the early modern Europe, right? Because he says, no, these guys were working together. You'll find that it's not an accident. They were working together. This was coordinated. The Turks felt sympathy for the Protestants because they were condemning the veneration of icons and were against the Pope. Yeah, we don't like the Pope. We hate those Catholics. All those icons. You guys worship Mary, so therefore we need to be treasonous and hand Europe to the Muslims because we'd rather be Muslim than Catholic, don't you know? Well, so it seems that when they were saying that, when the Dutch and all those people were making that claim, they meant it. They were actually serious about it. We'd rather be Muslim than Catholic. So, Moriscos, Othello and English treason. So the French Huguenots were in contact with the Moriscos, those poor Huguenots who were just simple little winemakers. In plans against Spain in the 1570s, around 1575, plans were made for a combined attack of Aragonese, Moriscos, and Huguenots from Bern under Henry de Navarre against Spanish Aragon, in agreement with the King of Algiers and the Ottoman Empire. Okay, well, suddenly you have different Islamic North African countries, and you've got the Ottomans, and you've got those Moriscos, and you've got the French, and then you'll have the Dutch, you've got the English, you've got the Spanish even. So basically, you're going to find that you've got these Protestant elements suddenly find themselves working with the enemy to overthrow Europe and allow Muslims to take over Europe. What if that's happening today? So these projects founded with the arrival of John of Austria and Aragon and the disarmament of the Moriscos. So those crypto-Muslims, I know that people love to go on and what about the Jews, the crypto-Jews? Well, what about the crypto-Muslims? Really, what about the crypto-Muslims? Because they nearly sold out entire countries. And then what about the Protestants who sold out all of Europe? This is Lee, Henry Charles, and this is from 1 January 1999, the Moriscos of Spain, their conversion and their expulsion. Diplomatic relations and alliances were established between Queen Elizabeth. Queen Elizabeth sold out like you will not believe. And the Barbary States. England entered into a trading relationship with Morocco, detrimental to Spain, selling armor, selling ammunition. Where did they get all the metal? Well, you see, what happens is they killed the Catholics, they plundered the church estates, they gave the land to the royals, all over Europe, in fact. And what happens is these royals suddenly became very wealthy and they gained a lot of land. How they did it is a complete mystery. But suddenly the Catholic Church disappeared in those places, and the lands that were part of the church suddenly ended up in the hands of Protestant royals. And then the metal from the bells and suddenly all of that was melted down, and next thing you know, the Muslims had lots of metal for weapons. Where that metal came from is a total mystery. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. It'll remain a mystery forever. And then, armor, ammunition, timber, metal. Again, where that metal came from, nobody knows. In exchange for Moroccan sugar. Can I borrow a cup of sugar? Because I'm gonna help you take over Europe, because then you're gonna let me run my little kingdom here and I'll be rich. And okay, fine, we'll all be Muslim eventually, but that's okay, because at least we'll be rich Protestants for a while. And in spite of a papal ban on aiding and abetting the Ottomans, the Muslims, in invading and destroying Christian culture in Europe, they said, no, we don't listen to that Pope, because the Pope is evil. He is the Antichrist, and we got to go with those Muslims because they're my homies. And so the papal nuncio in Spain said of Elizabeth, there is no evil that is not devised by that woman, who it is perfectly plain succored Morocco, which is Abd al-Malik, with arms, and especially with artillery, because the English and the Dutch have a starring role in betraying Europe, in aiding the Islamic forces to conquer Europe. Othello in 1600, Abdul Uwaid ben Masaoud, however you say that name, the principal secretary to the Moroccan ruler, Moulay Ahmed El Mansour, visited England as an ambassador to the court of Queen Elizabeth, and of course now he becomes the famous Othello. Anglo-Moroccan alliance. So let me see, have I missed anything? Welcome, Just Janice. How are you doing? You haven't missed anything. I was 20 minutes late. It is entirely my fault. So, so let me see. I have a comment here. Dudon Calixte Asin. Wow, fantastic name. That is amazing, you know. Some people have great, like Porfirio, amazing names. Hello, Lloyd. I've been following and listening to you for more than a year, and I'm really impressed and shocked at the same time. I want to thank you for digging and sharing all these informations. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for finally commenting. You're welcome. Yeah. Sandro, I wonder if the view of the Bible as incarnation of the Word of God had some Quranic influence. Yes, it did. You know what? I'm already working on notes for that. I'm already working on the, shall we say, the unmistakable Protestant theological alignment with Islam, based on, shall we say, extensive cultural exchanges. Let's call it that for the time being. Let's just call it that for the moment. You might find a little bit of a parallel that has not really been explored, but is actually has been acknowledged academically for some time, but is very isolated. We'll talk all about that. So nothing new under the sun. I want my Abbey back. Yes. Yeah, exactly. Let me see. It's odd that a Protestant complaint is the Catholic Church was too involved in politics. Well. The Protestants straight away hooked up with political forces, including leadership in the UK. Yeah, they also formed state churches. Martin Luther wanted state churches. Few people realize how despotic, how actually tyrannical both Calvin and Martin Luther were. It's shocking. Wow. I mean, okay, moving on. The Moroccan ruler wanted the help of an English fleet to invade Spain. When they say Spain, they mean destroy the Catholics. And Elizabeth refused, but she welcomed the embassy as a sign of insurance and instead accepted to establish commercial agreements. Queen Elizabeth and King Ahmed continued to discuss various plans for combined military operations, with Elizabeth requesting a payment of £100,000 back then. I don't know, it's worth, $1 billion today, in advance to King Ahmed for the supply of a fleet, and Ahmed asking for a tall ship to be sent to get the money. Now, remember, this is a summary of a much larger history, okay? So Elizabeth agreed to sell munitions, weapons, to Morocco, so that they could, because remember, Martin Luther was going on, like, how are we going to screw over those Catholics? The Catholics are evil. They are totally evil, horrific, evil Catholics. What are we going to do? And Elizabeth's like, I'll give you weapons, you shoot them. And the King of Morocco is like, sounds like a deal. And the Ottomans were like, what about us? And she says, we'll give you weapons and you shoot them. And then, you know what? When you guys invade Europe, we'll just sit at home and sip our cocoa and we'll pretend we didn't hear any cries for help, because we're good Christians, but murder the Catholics if you don't mind. And and then once the Catholics are defeated, then we'll just go, oh, shock, horror, good grief, oh, good grief, good, oh, wow, hey, we have a treaty, and how about you leave us alone and we become rich because now you guys are in charge and we're homies, right? We're buddies. That was the deal, basically. So Elizabeth agrees to sell munitions and supplies to Morocco, and she and Mulai Ahmad al-Mansur talked on and off about mounting a joint operation against the Spanish. Radio. England exported tin and lead for cannon casting and ammunition to the Ottoman Empire. Elizabeth seriously discussed joint military operations with Murad III during the outbreak of war with Spain in 1585, as Francis Walsingham was lobbying for a direct Ottoman military involvement against the common Spanish enemy. I know what you're saying. I know what many people are thinking. Many Protestants who seem to take every opportunity to point out how Jews are bad, that, maybe she was Jewish. Maybe Walsingham was Jewish. Maybe. Okay, moving on. I mean, they can't be Protestant, can they? English writers of the period often expressed admiration towards the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. Yeah, let's praise these nice Muslims, right? Describing it as endowed with majestical and august form and features. Just like Martin Luther was saying, not even Jesus, not the apostles, have a form as wonderful and as clean as these Muslims, because Martin Luther wouldn't say things like that, because sola scriptura, he loved Jesus, he followed Jesus, not the Pope, and therefore he wouldn't say nice things about, like everyone else was, about the Muslims to the detriment of Christianity, now would he? And they said that they were the powerfulest nation in Europe, stating that the Turks were the only modern people great in action. He who would behold these times in their greatest glory could not find a better scene than Turkey. It's a fancy way of saying, yeah, we'd rather be Muslim than Catholic, because my God, those Catholics follow the Bible. They worship Jesus. They've got churches. They've got icons in their church. And no. I think we need to sell out to the Muslims. It's kind of a fancy way of saying that. And of course, they had incredible civility. I mean, mass migration's great because all those civil Muslims, that incredible civility. Yeah, it doesn't sound like propaganda at all. No, doesn't strike me as propaganda at all. Because the Muslims always fulfill their promises of not attacking Christians. Of course, there you go. Thank you, Sandro. You have struck the nail. You struck the thumb right on the nail. Correct. Yeah, Martin Luther and Calvin are responsible for this deep divide in Christianity. Yes, well, we'll look more at that. So now let's have a look at this Englishman with a turban on his head. So the English, of course, played, I forgot to put a title up there. So the English played both sides. The English were not afraid to play both sides of the fence. Let's have a look. England maintained a significant relationship with the Shia too. Oh boy. In 1616, a trade agreement was reached between Shah Abbas of Persia and the East India Company in 1622. A joint Anglo-Persian force, the Muslims with the English. The Shia Muslims and the English, the UK, they attacked the Portuguese and the Spanish traders together and expelled them from the Persian Gulf in the capture of Hormuz. And they said, you know what, let's work together. Us English will unite with our fellow brothers, the Shia, and we will take those Protestant or Catholic, doesn't really matter to us. We're going to expel those, those Catholic Portuguese and Spanish because they're Catholics. I mean, God, we need to do something. They're Catholic. Catholics are evil, and us, we share a common, we are more alike because that's what the letters say, right? And and then we'll take over the trade and make a lot of money, and we'll sell out and we'll make out like bandits because that's what Muhammad did, and we like it. So that's exactly what they do. And a group of Englishmen led by Robert Shirley modernized the Persian army and developed its contacts with the West. So the English said, you know what, you've got the Ottomans on one side, let's play the other side, let's go to the Persians and let's make them a better army, let's train them, let's give them weapons, let's give them technology, let's work together. And in 1624, he led an embassy to England in order to obtain trade agreements. So he took them with him a couple of times to England. Robert Shirley, and this here is his what's called a Circassian wife, Teresa, right? he led, this is circa 1624, 1627. So he leads the 1609 to 1615 Persian embassy or Persian group to Europe. Sunni Islam, oddly enough, now here's an interesting point about the Circassians, because that's his wife, and he's dressed here like a Persian. Sunni Islam became the dominant religion among Circassians in the 17th century, following a long period of Islamization. She was the daughter of Ismail Khan, a brother-in-law, which is a proper Christian name probably. He was a brother-in-law of the king of Persia. So she was the niece of the Shah's wife, right? Or something like that. She grew up in Isfahan in the Iranian royal court. 2 February 1608, with the approval of her aunt and Abbas, that's the Shah of Iran, Theresia married Shirley in Iran. Their son's godparents were the Prince of Wales, for whom he was named, he was called Henry, and Queen Anne. So the godparents of this. So now you had a royal connection, a direct royal connection between the Shah of Iran, one of his family members, and the Queen. Interesting. Fascinating stuff. Princess Theresia Samsonia, known as Teresa Khan. She was born in 1589 into a noble Orthodox Christian, Greek or Georgian Orthodox Circassian family in the Safavid Empire. At one point, now these people were at one point Orthodox, but of course, because of invasion by Muslims, they eventually became Muslims. They ruled at the time by King Shah, the king or Shah Abbas the Great. Returning to Kazvan, at that time the capital, from the last mission with Shirley, he and Theresia were rewarded by the king with valuable gifts. Because, of course, they were doing nothing to benefit these Muslims, so of course there's no way that they would get gifts for, okay? Shirley and the envoy, however, became seriously ill with fever shortly after their arrival, and he died shortly after. Some nobles in Iran were very envious of the king's treatment of Theresia, these Christians, and her husband after his death. So they started plundering her wealth and accused her of converting to Christianity from Islam. Interesting. And not actually being born a Christian. So, okay, fine. We'll leave that as it is. It seems that she was a Christian, though. Or maybe she was a Muslim for a while, or maybe she played both sides. It's hard to tell. In those days, those were fatal accusations, but Theresia convinced her judges that she was, is, and always will be a devout Christian and a good, loyal member of the Shah's court. And of course, she'll get rewarded for helping the Shah do things in Europe. And Circassians, now just a little bit about Circassians, because Sir Robert Shirley did a lot to, shall we say, help improve the military standing of the Persians. But Circassians have always played major roles in areas where they settled. In Turkey, those of Circassian origin have had massive influence, being instrumental in the Turkish War of Independence and among the elites of Turkey's intelligence agency. Fascinating. In Jordan, they founded the capital city of Amman and continued to play a major role in the country. In Syria, they served as volunteer guards of the Allies upon their entry into the country and still have high positions in Syria. In Libya, they serve in high military positions. That's a famous Christian country, as you know, Libya. In Egypt, they were part of the ruling class. That's Jordan, Turkey, famous Christian countries, as you know. In Egypt, they were part of the ruling class. They pulled a lot of clout there, believe it or not. The largest Circassian clan in the country also contributed to Egyptian and Arabic cultural, literary, intellectual, and political life, starting with the reign of Muhammad Ali Pasha in Egypt and continued to the modern day, the Abbaza family. So, yeah, it looks like they are very highly connected to various leading groups. Looks like they always operate at the top level of politics and intelligence, and obviously it's got nothing to do with Teresa and Robert Shirley. Definitely nothing to do. England becomes a rogue state because England is now trading with the Muslims. It is selling out Europe for money. And of course, even its own partners are going like, hold on, this is too much. This needs to stop. Please don't do that. You are feeding the Muslims that are going to overrun us and kill us. We've been at war with for decades and centuries. And of course, Elizabeth was like, no, I like making money. So I'll sell out my Christian heritage. I'll sell out Christendom. I'll sell out Europe because look how much money I'm making, damn it. So was it really the Russian Empire that finished off the Ottomans? I mean, they did fail, I think, in war against the Russians, but no, I would say it's that's a different topic for another day. It was, I think, after they fought with the Germans, they got destroyed. Unfortunately for them, most Portuguese captains were also Knights of the Order of Christ, formerly Templars. Sandra says, one of these crypto-Muslims helped create the Freemasonry. We'll have a look into that. the Marian dogma does seem to be the biggest issue with Protestants, and that's why Europe has to become Muslim, because according to the thinking of the Muslims, the Protestants of the day, because you can't have that. So rather, it's better to be Muslim than to be Catholic, because at least we won't have Marian dogma. Like, we'll pray with our asses up in the sky, but that's okay, because we won't be Catholic. I mean, that seems to be their thinking. So, yeah, what else can I say? So, moving on. So, Elizabeth eventually earns the nickname of Sultana Isabel. So she gets the name Sultana Isabel. She becomes a sultana, female sultan, from the ruler of Morocco, because, the ruler of Morocco calls her that because they're so close with the Muslims. Great. Because of their alliances, they're isolated from Europe and needed trade partners. In 1581, Elizabeth authorized the export of naval-grade timber to Morocco in exchange for saltpeter, which was necessary in gunpowder. So they were willing to help them build fleets to invade Europe as long as they had saltpeter to build weapons to defend themselves, because they were going to be attacked because they were betraying and cheating Europe. England also had a monopoly on Morocco trade for 12 years. In her letters to Al-Mansur, Elizabeth, over 25 years, she described the relationship between the two countries as la buena amistad y confederación que hay entre nuestras coronas, meaning the great friendship and cooperation that exists between our crowns, and she presented herself as your sister and relative, your family member, according to the law of the crown and the scepter. I am your sister. And so that's definitely not selling out, definitely not close to these Muslims, because she definitely took a strong side of, we believe in Christ. We don't stand with those anti-Christian Muslims who deny Christ. No. Oh, sorry, no, which is wrong. No, she was the sister to the Muslims, and we need to destroy those Catholics because those Catholics are evil. Muslims are just fine. Look how much money we're making. So Protestant slaves were, of course, acquired by the Barbary pirates in slave raids on ships and by raids on coastal towns from Ireland to the Netherlands and the southwest of Britain, as far north as Iceland, because that's what your brothers do to you, because Protestant slaves, and that's okay as long as Elizabeth is making a lot of money. It's okay. She's making a lot of money, and as long as these Muslims come in and take over and do bad things, it's okay, because we're making lots of money. So besides the obvious differences between the two religions, there are also many similarities in their outlooks and attitudes to faith, especially with Sunni Islam, as we will discover, especially in respect to textual criticism, iconoclasm, tendencies to fundamentalism, rejection of marriage as a sacrament, rejection of necessary penance by priests, and the rejection of monastic orders. And one could ask yourself, where did Protestantism get these ideas? And I'll give you three guesses. Information supplied by Martians, it fell like rain from the sky, or option three, Sunni Islam. You pick one. Okay. So let's look at the theological Sunni, how the theological Sunni and Protestant overlap is very specific and very systematic. This is not an in-depth analysis, but I want to introduce the idea, because I'll cover that in another series where I'll talk about this. Mike Samal says, I'm starting to have trouble calling Protestants Christians. Well, they called Muslims their brothers, so, because apparently that's what they were. Elizabeth would have said she was doing it for her country, plus the money, of course. Yeah, they were. Well, they had a shared purpose. They had a shared common enemy. Those evil, horrendous, shape-shifting, mutant Catholics, the lizards that are sitting in the Vatican. And of course, they needed to destroy them and therefore they said, you know what, we are so religiously similar to the Ottomans and to those North African Muslims. We need to, those are our brothers in Christ. Or something, and they give us lots of money. It's got nothing to do with the money, but they do give us a lot of money. We become very rich, and they're taking slaves from Europe, but that's okay because look how much money we're making. That's pretty much was the reasoning, as far as I can tell. Happy birthday, Lloyd! No, my birthday is September the 1st. My birthday, September the 1st. But thank you very much, Freddie. Let me see. Century Census, I'm tired of most protests. I'm really tired of this 500-year-long protest. Yeah. So let me see. Okay, so Mike says, Belinda says, Mike, this is what happens when a society forgets that Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, unto God what is God's. They were making a lot of money, okay? Don't slam them. So Protestantism and Sunni Islam do share key attitudes. This is a small summary. At a future point, I'll go into depth on the collaboration, cultural, historical, and so on. But you've got military cooperation, you've got economic cooperation, you've got cultural, diplomatic cooperation. There's no reason, given all of this, that there won't be theological cooperation. But now you can see theological convergence between Protestants and Sunni Islam, right? I know I'm making some bold claims, but let's go through this. So first of all, textual criticism. Now, sola scriptura parallels Sunni reliance on Quran over tradition, as with the Hanbalis, for instance. Now, for instance, you've got Protestants going sola scriptura, right? The Bible alone. So they can choose whatever theological direction they want to travel in. But with Muslims, you've got a similar, not exactly, because contextually there's going to be different, but these ideas moved across, and the Protestants were taking these ideas and adapting them to their own purposes. Within Islam, you can choose which madhab you want to follow. You have a choice between the madhab, and of course that madhab can choose to reject or accept various hadiths and so on in terms of the imam that you follow. So there's a certain, shall we say, freedom of choice in terms of theological range. So there's a similarity there. So now you've got scripture, the Bible or the Quran, is held over and above tradition, emphasizing original texts, what they claim at least is original texts, right? Iconoclasm, you've got Protestants and Sunnis reject religious images. So they oppose, quote unquote, idolatry, because Catholicism is evil, but look how similar, as we've seen, quote after quote, and letter after letter, documented reports in history that, we Protestants are so much more similar theologically to you Muslims than to those evil Catholics. And we don't do idolatry. So therefore we are closer. We are more, and you guys love Jesus, don't you? The Muslims keep saying that. So they oppose idolatry and worship. And you look at the Protestant destruction of images. You have Reformation iconoclasm, and this mirrors Sunni and iconism, right? Like Wahhabi prohibitions, as an example. And we're going to find that there is a certain, shall we say, many of these ideas from the Protestant Reformation that became part of Calvin and Luther and all of these other reformers are taken from a certain scholar. In particular, there seems to be a certain love of a guy called Ibn Taymiyyah. And these ideas bled straight into Protestantism, straight out of Islam. Boom. So they modeled these ideas, or one way or another, these ideas made their way from Islam straight into Protestantism. Fundamentalism, both exhibit tendencies towards strict literalist interpretations of sacred texts. Protestant literalism, like the Puritanism, aligns with Sunni revivalist movements like that of Ibn Taymiyyah. It doesn't just stop there. That's quite extensive. It's actually scary once you start looking in detail. Neither views marriage as a sacrament. They treat it as a civil contract. Protestants and Sunnis view marriage as a contract, not a divine sacrament like Catholicism, which is fascinating. Martin Luther took on that idea too. Then penance. Both reject mandatory priestly penance, favoring direct repentance to Allah. Protestant rejection of Catholic confession is the same as Sunni direct repentance, called tawbah, with no intermediaries. I pray straight to Jesus. I've heard this a lot from Protestants. I've heard it all the time. And that's exactly what the Muslims do. Where'd they get that idea? Not part of early Christian history. It is not part of early Christian tradition. It is not part of recorded Christian practice until the Reformation. Then you have monasticism. Protestants and Sunnis dismiss monastic orders, promoting active societal engagement. Then Protestant, Luther, and Sunnis, no monastic tradition in Islam, favor worldly engagement. Interesting. So then we can say, okay, so those are the broad strokes. Is there more detailed analysis? Yes, there is. We'll get there. Now, for example, these ideas flourished in Al-Andalus, and you had, for instance, what they called Arabic Christians that adopted Muslim-like practices, because they'd spent a lot of time. Then you've got Moriscos, and you've got Eastern Europe, and you've got the Byzantines. Let's not forget those guys. And in Ottoman territories, Calvinists in Hungary rejected Catholic structures. So what did they do? They said, well, hey, there's all these fascinating ideas by these amazing Muslims. Look how pious they are. We need to copy those ideas. And then you've got converts. You've got, we'll talk about the Unitarians again. We'll come back to the Unitarians, and we'll ask ourselves, just how Christian are they? Are these a little bit too Muslim for our tastes? you'll discover they're very, very Muslim. But the Islam to Protestant pipeline, let's talk about that. Just a few centuries later, and the Mormons are further away from Christianity than Islam. Well, I begin to understand how the Portuguese and Spanish Empire fell at the same time the British Empire grew. Yeah, well, just Janus, yeah. So the problem is it's part of the identity, the name, Protestant. So they're protesting Catholic theology. But it seems that they turned, after they refused to accept the structures of the Catholic Church, they, of course, accepted the Sharia. Man, you know what? You got to start looking at the origins of English common law. And let's just say the historical consensus as it is developing today, based on research from like 20 years ago, the roots of English common law is now accepted. It was obviously disputed at one point, but it is now accepted that because there was no way to tie it correctly to Roman law or so on, because it just seemed a bit of a hodgepodge. And then now scholars are accepting that, yes, English common law is based on the Sharia. I'll just leave that there, and we'll come back to that in the near future. But yes, let's just say that Islam had more than a casual effect on Europe, more than just a casual passing effect on English society. So let me see. Let's see if I've missed anything. So the Islam to Protestant pipeline, you've got a specificity of vector, right? So the single vector of bringing all of these Islamic ideas, because these ideas do not parallel, I checked, these ideas do not parallel early Christianity. These ideas are not historically found before the Reformation. These ideas are not part of the writings of the early church fathers. These ideas are Islamic, specifically Islamic, and now they are specifically paralleled with Protestantism. You find this, and they're not Catholic. These are Muslim Protestant ideas. So the single vector is Christian-Muslim contact, via Spain, because you're looking at medieval translations, you're looking at these Moriscos, and you're looking at Mozarabic influence. Then you've got Cyprus. Cyprus is a major vector, and I've got to thank one of my subscribers I've spoken with on this. We've been looking at this, and it is jaw-dropping. I mean, it is jaw-dropping what you can find in modern history papers where this is well known, right? Cyprus was a major vector. You have Ottoman cultural exposure, and certain governance, ideas of governance in Cyprus were transplanted wholesale to the UK. And then you have Eastern Europe, you have Ottoman diplomatic and military support. And then, of course, you've got England. Now, this vector aligns with the timing. You've got Hussite to post-Reformation, Jan Hus, because when I started to talk about how Martin Luther had really become a complete sellout, what happened was people started to go, but we don't follow Martin Luther, and he's not a major figure in the Reformation. Yeah, that's why we celebrated in 2017 the 500th year of the Reformation based on Martin Luther, because he was not important at all. Definitely had nothing to do with the Reformation. And they went, so fine. Martin Luther was a lying, blasphemous, dishonest, evil, genocidal, hateful maniac, but he's nothing to do with the Protestant Reformation. No, we've got to go to Jan Hus. And then you start to look at Jan Hus, and when you talk about genocidal, warlike, blasphemous maniac, Jan Hus kind of fits that mold as well for some odd reason, because he was also busy making jihad. So you look at Jan Hus, so you've got the Jan Hus period, and then post-Reformation. You've got geography that matches, you've got Islamic, Christian borderlands, and you've got theological specifics. So you have Islamic ideas, you've got textual criticism, iconoclasm, fundamentalism, rejection of sacramental marriage, rejection of penance, confession, right? You've got monasticism, all gone. None of this developed in a vacuum, nor by random chance, or by Martian intervention. It didn't fall out of the sky like rain. They originated in 7th to 8th century Islamic theology. You've got the Quran. Then you'll find there's massive overlap, shockingly, in Protestant theology with Asharite, Hanbali traditions, and others. There are other groups. I'll cover that in depth another time. So now I'm introducing the ideas, and we'll cover this in depth. And they were transmitted to Protestantism through a single vector, direct Christian-Muslim contact in Spain, Cyprus, and Eastern Europe, and during the Hussite and post-Reformation periods. Then you've got, for instance, remember Servetus's Quran. Servetus was quoting the Quran to say, I know Christianity is wrong. The church has lied to us because look what the Quran says. The Quran, this is the revelation of Allah, of God, as they serve the same God. And the Quran says that the Bible is wrong. And really, we need to listen to the Quran. And Muhammad was right. Muhammad is right. There's no Trinity, because why Servetus was rubbing it in really thick. Read some of his stuff. You're like, what the hell's going on here? Then you've got Reynold. There's the English Protestant Anglican that became Catholic eventually, and his observations in Calvino Turcismus and so on. Then you've got Ottoman Protestant ties, extensive. These ties were diplomatic, theological, cultural, military, and you have evidence of this transmission. So the Protestants adopted Islamic frameworks that are absent in early Christianity, absent in Catholicism, but they are present in Sunni Islam, and a little bit of overlap with Shia Islam, as we just mentioned earlier. Okay, Unitarians and Islam. So, petition in support of including Islam in the Unitarian Universalist sources of inspiration. So let me just pause that a moment. I need to bring up this document. Yeah, so let me continue here. So now the Unitarians, let's come back to these Unitarians, because these guys, thank you for the compliment on my name. You're very welcome. That's quite an amazing name. Yeah. So William Albrecht, let me see. Let me go. God the Father in Mormonism is a man that elevated himself to divinity. Yeah, well, that's exactly what these Unitarians say, and these are Protestant groups. Understand, these came out of the Protestant Reformation, and they came out of Islam-controlled areas. And the Protestants were saying, hey, no, we've got to be tolerant. We've got to allow this Islamified Christianity, this Chrislamic religion, to be seen as equally valid as all other groups. I mean, these guys literally fit John's views of the Antichrist. But according to the Bible alone, we follow only Jesus. Protestants, this is good stuff. It's perfectly valid Christianity, even though they reject Jesus as God and they reject the Trinity. But they're just as good. We need to be tolerant, because the Ottoman Empire controls us actually, and they are, the Ottoman Sultan. His hand is up my butt, and he's moving my mouth for me as I'm saying this. And so, yeah, we are good Christians, and those evil Catholics. My God, look at those evil Catholics. That was the story back then. Mealy Dave says, the more you reveal, the more I understand why Islamic history was covered up when I went to school. Talk about being blinded by this wretched crown. Yeah, Mealy Dave, thank you for that. I do appreciate it, and thank you that people actually see that my thesis here and the evidence makes sense. Now, look, this is a summary of. I've got 109 slides here, I believe, and I've got 12. I've got about 20 slides more to go. That said, this is a summary of hundreds, thousands of pages of data. And I'll do a second stream. I'm busy preparing. I'm just busy collecting the notes now. So in a few weeks, I'll have another set ready to go, and we'll start to look at this, the theological alignment and the source of these ideas, how Protestantism was taking from Protestant ideas were stolen from Sunni Islam, and so you have Islam integrated into as the one Muslim paper that I showed you, and this guy writes a whole paper on it, how the Reformation, how Protestantism is actually Islamized Christianity, and the man's not wrong. Okay, he's not wrong, not as far as I can tell, and that's a conclusion that I was sent this paper today by someone who looked into it, but it's a conclusion I had already reached, and it turns out scholars have been writing about this for decades. Just didn't know about it. And but me, Dave, let me say, the more you dig, the more you see, the worse it gets. It doesn't get better. It's even worse than you think, which is the scary part. But thank you. Just Janice says, recently someone kindly gifted me a membership on Patristic Pillars, certainly opening my eyes. Well, that's great. Yeah, I've had what's his name? Patristic Pillars ghost me. So if someone wants to talk to him about that, because let's just say as far as I know, I'm radioactive in Catholic YouTube circles. I'm not welcome, as far as I know. So for whatever those reasons are, I'm radioactive in Catholic circles on YouTube. So, but if anyone wants to remind him that he and I were supposed to get together, because he contacted me and then he ghosted me, and then he spoke to me once again, and a year later, and ghosted me again. So. That's William Albrecht, yeah. So let me see. Okay, yeah. So this Unitarian petition in support of including Islam in the Unitarian Universalist sources of inspiration, calling upon all peoples, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Louisville, to vote on, this is May 2022, in support of including Islam in the Unitarian Universalist sources of inspiration. And they speak here of, I'll just do a few highlights, Islamic influence on Servetus and the early Unitarians. Reverend Alicia M. Forsey, PhD, who wrote a paper on this, wrote a book on it. She's a Unitarian Universalist minister, regarded as one of the most knowledgeable historians of early Unitarianism, testifies to the respect which Michael Servetus had for Islam, and has asked, how is it that we claim Michael Servetus as one of our earliest founders, but do not know that he was burned at the stake by John Calvin, because he said during his trial that he would prefer to be judged by the Turks, because the Turks would approve of his Christianity, because, yeah, they'd approve of his form of Christianity. I wonder why. And that was that he was well informed of the Quran and used it in forming his own theological views. Email to Dr. Refat Hassan, dated February 23, 2022. This is a legitimate paper on the website of this organization. Whereas Servetus was greatly influenced by Islam's categorical rejection of the doctrine of the Trinity, and he quoted Quranic texts unequivocally proclaiming the oneness of Allah. The Ottomans would be proud. The Muslims would be proud. Servetus refused to remove from his books the Quranic citations and the praise he gave to Islam and the Prophet Muhammad. Okay, that's what Christians do. We praise the Quran and we praise the Prophet Muhammad. And we say, yeah, the Quran is right, the Bible is wrong, there's no Trinity. That's what Christians do. Continuing to assert that a good Muslim was as worthy of salvation as any other person, so long as they loved God and did good works. Here's where Protestants really need to lose their minds and go, works? Oh my God, no, not works. Faith alone, right? Whereas Servetus exerted a formative influence on the radical religious reformers, Giorgio Bayandrata and Ferenc David, founders of the first Unitarian Church in Transylvania, which was under the jurisdiction of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Muslim ruler, who, following the covenants of Prophet Muhammad, and here they lie about dimitude. These are dummies. These are people who have no idea, who desperately want to be dummies. Following the covenants of Prophet Muhammad with non-Muslims, gave his protection to the infant church, allowing it to grow and thrive. You need to ask yourself, are these people in government? Ask yourself, seriously. And the question can be answered with the one example I provide. Protection. We're the mafia. We need to protect you. You know, you've got a nice store. It'd be a shame if someone smashed everything or burned it down. We'd like to protect you from, you know. Whereas it has been pointed out by Reverend Justin Osterman in his sermon delivered on 23rd June, as Unitarians, we are the direct beneficiaries of Muslim tolerance towards other faiths. Without the protection of the Ottoman Turks, our faith might never have had the chance to establish a foothold in Europe. And our religious views might never have survived to help shape contemporary Western culture. That's what he says here. Okay, let's have a look at this document. Where the heck did the document go? Oops. Let me go back up. Somehow I closed the document. So let me bring this document back up. And this is the document here. Petition in support of including Islam. This is on their website. All right. They go on to say a few things here. Let's. Islam and Unitarian Universalism, a shared perspective. Yeah, they share perspectives. Remember, this was a Protestant Reformation movement. They went a little too far, you know, but they were still a Reformation movement. These guys were in thick with the other reformers. They weren't a fringe element. This was fairly mainstream, right? They say things like Muslims and others, our action of immediate witness. Okay, we recognize that Muslims and others perceived as Muslims in the United States have faced increased levels of discrimination and hate crime since 9/11. You know what they're saying? Imagine if Muslim jihadis had to let off a nuclear bomb in New York and kill 20 million people. Imagine the backlash against the peaceful Muslims. That would be horrific. You'd have this violent backlash against peaceful Muslims. You know, I mean, yeah, they're very worried here. They are very, very worried. Whereas Islam has been condemned by many Americans in leadership positions, like the former president of the US, Donald Trump, who proclaimed that Islam hates us. Like, yes, it does. You'd think they'd have read the Quran by now. Franklin Graham, who described Islam as a very wicked and evil religion. You can't have that. No, then, whereas, so the Reverend here, okay, we've already read that. Servetus was influenced by Islam's categorical rejection of the doctrine of Trinity, and he quoted Quranic texts. And it says here, which states, believe in them. So this is the words of Servetus. Believe then in God and his apostles. Believe in Allah and his apostles, and do not say that Allah is a Trinity. Desist from this assertion for your own good. Allah is but one Allah. Thank you, Michael Servetus. That is really helpful. I can see why your followers call you a devout Christian, because they do. These people, A, don't know Islam, B, they don't seem to know Christianity, or C, they're Muslims just lying through their teeth. They're just cosplaying. Maybe these are what you would call Moriscos. Maybe these are the Moriscos who are then pretending to be Christians to fit into polite society and undermine it from the inside. But these are Protestants. Protestants, you need to fix this. You need to do something about this. I know Protestants are going to go, but oh my gosh, I just follow Jesus. I don't follow Martin Luther. That's another lie. Because Protestant ideas, Protestant worldview, Protestant practice comes straight out of Martin Luther. But yeah, that's just a way to say, well, I'm innocent. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. So Servetus refused to move from his book the Quranic citations and the praise he gave to Islam and Prophet Muhammad. Servetus had a formative influence, okay? And we said this here. So we are the direct beneficiaries of Servetus, of Muslim tolerance. And the Ottomans, we owe them our faith and allegiance, and we owe them our respect, because we really need to roll over, because if it wasn't for the Muslims, who gave us tolerance, we wouldn't be here. Just Janice is very disturbing. Yeah, me too. Trust me, I am very disturbed. Gabriel Hernandez says, I had a reminder set up and the powers that be decided to let me miss the show. Better late than never. I was 20 minutes late, so I do apologize. I was unprepared. I was running late, so I'm so sorry. King Charles belonged to a tariqah for decades. Are you serious? Sufis. Oh my God, that is a problem. That is not good. A shared animosity against monasteries, yes. Century Sin says, I think you'll eventually be welcomed in. This information is explosive and I can understand their hesitation. Yeah, I'm only being very, very supportive of of Catholicism, and they're going, yeah, that look at that heretic. He's helping these Catholics too much, and but he's not good enough because he hasn't converted formally to Catholicism. We really need to smear him to, yeah, that's what happened anyway. But yeah, I mean, we shall see. We shall see. But yeah, that's all water under the bridge. Since then, Protestantism is 50 Shades of Islam. Yeah, we can't help what we're born into. Yeah, but okay, so let's look at the last quote that I'll give from this document, last couple of quotes. The question arises, when Servetus did not disavow the influence of Islam in his thinking, even in the face of death at the hands of John Calvin, why is the theological connection between Islam and Servetus not better known amongst Unitarians in general? Is it due to the generation of a false narrative intended to block the strong historical link between the Unitarians and Islam from the 16th century until now? We should say Protestant Unitarianism. A statement made by eminent Unitarian Universalist historian Reverend Susan J. Ritchie, PhD, is very significant in this context. Indeed, the only literature that has documented an Islamic influence, an Ottoman influence, on Transylvanian Unitarianism, which was a legitimate Protestant religion, is the anti-Trinitarian movements of the 17th and 18th. Oh my, it's not just the 16th, it's now the 17th and the 18th. These guys have been around, and they're around today, still doing their Muslim thing. Yeah, children of the same God. We're all children of the same God, the historical relationship between Unitarianism, Judaism, and Islam. So, Alicia M. Forsey, PhD, in a highly acclaimed book, Queen Isabella Sforza Zapolje of Transylvania and Sultan Suleiman of the Ottoman Empire, a case of 16th century Muslim-Christian collaboration. Notice this collaboration was not isolated purely to the, shall we call it, the Unitarians, who are almost certainly Moriscos who are now doing their Christian thing, but yeah, it extends to mainstream Protestantism. Mainstream Protestant leadership was up to their necks in Islam. and collaborating with Muslims, making money off it. So she has utilized little-known Ottoman Turkish, modern Turkish, Latin, English, Italian, and Hungarian texts and translations, and has demonstrated the crucial role played by Sultan Suleiman in ensuring the survival of Unitarianism in the 16th century. Dr. Forsey has acknowledged that her historical research will annoy historians who insist there was no common ground between the Muslims and the Christians in the 16th century. Thank you very much. I rest my case. I will cease here, Your Honor. Yes, that's... Yeah, let's continue. So, as you can see, this has nothing to do with Islam, and the Protestants did nothing wrong. I object. Thank you very much, Just Janice. Much appreciated. Wait, did they not claim they are the true Christians, meaning they are the true oldest church? So how could it be? I'm not sure what that refers to, but okay, yeah. So guys, am I just ranting and raving? Am I just making things up, or do we start to see that there's a little bit of a problem here? Give me 1 sec. I need to open a window. It is hot in here. I'll be right back. Right, so am I making things up, or am I starting to, are we tying threads together? And I know that I've made some very bold claims, as I always do. I tend to make some very strong assertions, but do you think I can back up what I'm saying? Do you think that the evidence backs me up, the history backs me up, that we can find these links and we can start to see these, how these ideas infuse their way into Europe and into the minds of the reformers? And that we can say, yeah, this does not come out of early Christianity, this comes out of Islam. Do you think I can do that? You know? So Gabriel Hernandez says, unfortunately, it seems the hate for the Catholic Church by Protestants has not gotten better. Yeah, it is unfortunate. Although I am noticing a swing towards Catholicism. I am seeing a dissatisfaction with the confusion, the fracturing, the fragmented theology within Protestantism that seems to be upsetting people. And then, of course, you've got a deeper investigation and appreciation these days within Protestant circles, as I'm seeing, for the early church fathers. So I think the pendulum is swinging back the other way. I do see a swing. Just Janice says, yes, she does. So yeah, I know I make strong statements, but I believe I am basing my statements on solid historical evidence, things that definitely have merit. I'm not just making it up because I'm a conspiracy theorist. This is the tip of the iceberg. I can't go through 1,000 pages of details here. Just all I can do is give what I think is a relevant overview based on my analysis of the documents. Ave Maria, well, thank you very much. Ave Maria Theotokos says, your name is not Muhammad. You are not making things up. Well, thank you. Ower says, the God I believe in does not hate unbelievers and does not wish for any to be damned, nor is he a deceiver, so they can keep their Allah, both them and Islam. Yeah, well, don't forget, the God of Calvin, according to John Calvin, hates not only the sin, but hates the sinner. Although the God of Calvin makes you sin, and then he hates you for it, and then he punishes you for doing exactly what he made you do, which you had no control over, because it doesn't make sense. So Valena says, yes, it's obvious that 1,000 denominations is stupid. Yeah, there's one church, right? One belief. There was unity that Jesus called for. So thank you. Okay, so Anglo-Turkish piracy. So guys, I've got 20 more slides. I'll probably go like another 15 minutes or so. Again, apologies for being late. I was running behind. So yeah, I got here a tad unprepared. But I'll go a little bit further, and then we'll do the last. I'll probably do the last one on maybe on Sunday. I might do the very last show. We'll see. Otherwise on Monday, because my weekend's very busy. I'm actually teaching a class tomorrow. I've got people coming in from Germany, from all over Poland, and I'm teaching loosely speaking, a tactical class, teaching edged weapons. I'm teaching empty hand, and I'll be doing a little bit of. This is made of rubber, okay? So don't. Yeah, it's made of rubber. That's a Glock 17 replica. So I'll be doing a bit of integration stuff. So this weekend I'm kind of busy as of tomorrow. And I've got guests coming in, so I'm going to meet with someone later who's coming in from Germany. I'm supposed to meet him. And then, and then tomorrow I'm busy. I've got a bunch of people coming in. Okay, so Anglo-Turkish piracy. After peace was made with Catholic Spain in 1604, English pirates nevertheless continued to raid Christian shipping in the Mediterranean. Now understand, this is a summary. I'm just doing the lightest overview. If you go into depth, the collaboration between the Christian Protestants and their assistance to the navies of the Ottomans, for instance, is insane. How they helped, how Protestants helped the Ottoman war machine is insane. Now, Granted, you can say some of it was coerced, and some of it was voluntary for money. So, after peace was made with Catholic Spain in 1604, the English pirates continued to raid Christian shipping in the Mediterranean. English pirates, under the protection of the Muslim rulers of the Barbary states. English pirates were being protected by the Muslim rulers of the Barbary states to interrupt Christian shipping, to disrupt the wealth of the Christians so that the Muslims could make a lot of money. The English were disrupting Christendom in Europe to benefit the Muslims so that they could make a lot of. Why are the Muslims protecting the English pirates? And then often these pirates would convert to Islam in the process, in what has been described as Anglo-Turkish piracy. Let's not forget the Dutch-Turkish piracy that came along too. There's a little bit of that maybe going on. You never know. The study of Anglo-Turkish piracy in the Mediterranean reveals a fusion of commercial and foreign policy interests embodied in the development of this special relationship. It wasn't just piracy, avast me hearties, shiver me timbers. Yeah, it didn't seem it was like an organic thing. It's like the Muslims were saying, if you guys will disrupt some shipping for us, we'll pay you lots of money and protect you. And the English were like, them Muslims are going to give us some money, my laddies. Let's do this for Islam, for Allah. Yeah, it's kind of a less romantic image than the pirates that were seeking fame and fortune on the high seas for adventure. No, it seems that actually they were working for the Muslims. That ruins my childhood. Seriously, this ruins my childhood. I wanted to be a pirate when I was a kid. I don't know about you. I wanted to be a pirate, and this ruins my childhood. So, Sergeant Grinch, hello and welcome. Villainous says a lot of this stuff looks like the worship of state and elitism rather than the worship of God. And that, Villainous, you're a genius. The things that you say are so, you encapsulate fantastic insights in a nutshell. 100%. 100%. Calvin was like that. Luther was like that. Tyrannical, despotic, authoritarian. Nailed it. Yes. Did I cover the raid on Cadiz by Drake? No, I did not. I didn't mention that. I'm just doing the Protestant stuff that I thought was relevant. I haven't done that. But no, that's a good point. Maybe I should look into that, Philip. I should look into that, the raid on Cadiz by Drake. Yeah. So where are we? So the instability did not bother people when society seemed stable and they could fall back on that. But now that it's disintegrating, people are starting to realize the spiritual sandcastles they have. Well said. Thank you. Mike Samar says, we lost this battle because of Queen Isabella I for having helped the Muslims. The Battle of Al-Qathr Kibir, also known as the Battle of the Three Kings, took place. I don't know much about that. So I don't, unfortunately. Okay, so the study of the Anglo-Turkish piracy in the Mediterranean means that there was certain commercial money. They're serving they're serving Allah and Mammon. You can do both actually in Islam, and I'm guessing. So yeah, there was a special relationship there. This is Robert William Love, New Interpretations in Naval History, selected papers from the 11th Naval History Symposium held at the United States Naval Academy in 1993. People have noticed this stuff decades ago. It's only coming to light in academia now. So, at the beginning of the 17th century, France complained about a new phenomenon, Anglo-Turkish piracy, because they're saying, what the hell are you doing? You're betraying Europe. And Queen Elizabeth was like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. Look how much money I'm making from these Muslims. They're making me rich. Like, hello, of course I'll sell out Europe. Not a problem. Jan Janssuen van Haarlem, that's a Dutch guy. He was a Dutch pirate. So he converted to Islam after capture by Algerian corsairs in 1618. And he takes the name Murat Reis. So as a Barbary corsair, Barbary pirate, he led the 1631 sack of Baltimore Island. He kidnapped over 100 villagers for slavery. His raids were backed by Ottoman support. His raids were backed by the Muslims. He targeted European coasts, supporting Islamic naval power. Okay. Yeah, and the English were doing a little bit of this, and the Dutch were doing a little bit of that, and they were... Yeah, so maybe the Muslim slavery of Europe was kind of helped along by these Protestants who said, liever Turks than Pops, rather Muslim than Catholic. Yeah, maybe they meant it when they said it. Maybe it wasn't just a slogan. Maybe they meant it. Looks like they did, actually. In the 16th century, the Ottomans supported the Calvinists in Transylvania and Hungary. And of course, they practiced religious toleration, although heavy taxation was imposed. Yeah, you know what? You guys can be Catholic here. Okay. I mean, so these ideas were borrowed because you'd find that some of the Protestants then turn around and say, well, you guys can be Catholic if you want, but you're going to have to pay us a little bit of jizya. So, yep. So you have the jizya happening and people are learning from these things. And Suleiman the Magnificent, in particular, also, this is also why they'd have to go and raid everybody and do piracy, because they got to pay for, for being Protestants, because look at the tolerance of the Ottomans. Suleiman the Magnificent, in particular, supported John Sigismund of Hungary, allowing him to establish the Unitarian Church in Transylvania. Yeah, we just read about the Unitarian Church, and I'd say there's something very fishy there. Very fishy. We just looked at some of their thoughts. Large parts of the population in Hungary thus became either Lutheran or Calvinist to become the Reformed Church in Hungary. Demise jizya and the Protestant treason in the 17th century, Protestant communities again asked for Ottoman help against the Habsburg Catholics. Prince Istvan Bocskai of Transylvania allied with the Ottoman Turks. 1620, the Transylvanian Protestant prince, Bethlen Gabor, fearful of the Catholic, Ferdinand II, requests the protection of Sultan Usman II. Got him on speed dial, made that call. He said, so that the Ottoman Empire became the one and only ally of great power status, which the rebellious Bohemian states could muster, after they had shaken off Catholic Habsburg rule and had elected Frederick V as a Protestant king. So they were allied because it benefited them. Ambassadors were exchanged. Heinrich Bitter visiting Istanbul in January 1620. This was going on across Europe. This is not isolated. And Mehmed Aga visited Prague in July 1620. I've been to Prague. If anyone has been to Prague, you may notice that Prague was the epicenter of alchemy. It was the epicenter of occult magical practice. It was, you go there. It is. I went to all of the museums of the occult. There's some amazing places, incredible underground, some secret laboratories that were found. But where'd they get these ideas? What if they came out of Islam? You never know. So the Ottomans, they offered a force of 60,000 cavalry to Frederick, and plans were made for an invasion of Poland with 400,000 troops in exchange for the payment of an annual tribute to the Sultan. I tell you what, you help us take over Europe, and I'll let you become king. You'll have a little bit of control. You can be my homie, and you just pay us a little bit of money. And the Protestants like, yeah, homie, where do I sign up? Yeah, it's not betrayal at all. So rich Protestant Transylvanian Saxon merchants traded with the Ottoman Empire and often donated Anatolian rugs to their churches as a wall decoration, more according to their iconoclastic beliefs than the images of the saints used by the Catholics and the Orthodox. Let's put this Islamic symbolism in our churches, because our churches become better and more Christian the more Islamic stuff we put inside our churches. Now, I'm not sure if the math is mathing here, but maybe it's me. Maybe I'm just not understanding how you don't put Christian things in a Christian church. You put Muslim things in a Christian church. And maybe, I don't know how that makes Christianity better. I'm not sure. Maybe someone can tell me. Maybe I'm missing the point here. Churches like the Black Church of Brasu still hold collections of rugs. And then, of course, you've got Hungarian leader Imre Tököli, in resistance to the anti-Protestant policies of the Habsburgs, of course, asked and obtained the military help of the Ottoman Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa, leading to the 1683 Ottoman attack on the Habsburg Empire in the Battle of Vienna, which is always blamed on the Muslims. But somehow, now we discover, when you look at the history correctly, actually the Battle of Vienna that nearly collapsed Europe. If the Muslims had won, they would have taken Europe. Europe would have been under the boot of the Muslims. Europe was sold out by Lutherans. We'll get into that history in a minute, but that for me is extremely disturbing, very disturbing. The betrayal of Europe, the destruction of Catholic Europe at any cost, as long as they can make a little bit of money, they were willing to sell out Europe to Islam, the Lutherans. Okay, let's see. What have I missed? I don't know why these so-called Christians try to hide the truth when it is so obvious they are supporting Islam rather than Christianity. And yes, I have the same questions. I am very disturbed by this history. I am really disturbed by this. So yeah, I share the same concern. Then again, the French also allied with the Ottomans and the Romanians and Hungarians from time to time. Now, of course, everyone's going to go, but everyone was doing it. Look, isolated incidents by the French for whatever particular reasons, and the French were condemned by the Catholics for selling out, right, in that incident. The Protestants were doing it wholesale. Everyone's going to go, this is like when the BBC or the Brits or the whatever, Keir Starmer or whomever says, well, I know the Muslims have like driven cars through Christmas markets, but every religion has violence. It's like, no, not every religion has jihad. Not every religion has jihadis. Buddhists don't have them. Christianity doesn't have them. Not every religion has the Sharia, which makes lying compulsory, makes jihad compulsory, makes death of the unbeliever compulsory. Show me that in Jesus' words. Show me the Christian Sharia. So the whataboutism and the what's the other term that people use? The everybody does it argument. There's a word for that. All that where the all sides or whatever, both sides. Sorry, yeah, the both sides argument in this case is bullshit. So sorry, yeah. So let me see. How much was the reintegration of slavery in the West due to closer ties to Islam? Probably 100%. I'd say probably 100%. Villainous. I'd say how about you can use, there's some very good AI-based search engines. If you ask the right query, ask it to go and dig deep, it'll probably come back with the answer. So you can do some really interesting research these days. England supplied ships and weapons to Morocco against Portugal, and Queen Elizabeth sent friendly letters to Sultan Murad III. She was sending a lot of friendly letters to a lot of people. Yeah, she was. So let's see. The Ottomans were excellent at identifying splits and cracks in enemy fronts. Exactly. Mike Samar says the Protestant Dutch also created close friendships with the Berber corsairs of North Africa to weaken Spain and the Catholic Church. Yeah, this runs in one direction. Trust me, this just generally runs in one direction. The fact that you've got human weakness, you've got coercion, forcing people to do certain things, that was the Protestant game. That was the Ottoman game. But when you look at the totality of the evidence, this thing runs in one direction. This is Protestants and Muslims against the rest of Catholic Europe. It's that simple. It really, treason seems to be easily purchased in Protestant countries. Yes, Sergeant Grinch, that is unfortunately the kind of conclusion that I've been coming to. It's hard to miss the conclusion. They do say Muhammad was sent to correct the previous prophets, don't they? Islam, the new and improved Christianity. Yes, H.M. Fogg, I hear you. Didon says, did I miss that? Somehow I've gone back into the wrong place, but thank you again for that. Where was I? Both siding. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Yeah, both siding. Yeah, the both sides. That both sides argument. No, but the Dems did something bad. Oh no, but look at the don't both side it. We know who the crazies are. We know who the people with the blue hair are. Okay, so. Or when they bring up the Crusades, implying they were bad, like when Martin Luther said the Crusades are bad. We don't want another one of those, now do we? Stay at home, let the Muslims punish you because you deserve it, you nasty, nasty Christians, you. Yeah. So yeah, wasn't just Martin Luther. It was like, let's just roll over, pray dead, and hope they use Vaseline when they come for us. There's a lot of that going on. Starmer is a you're right. Let me see. Ave Maria Theotokos says, also I believe that name is Turkish for Muhammad, but started getting spelled with T after it evolved. Now it is Mehmet. Yes, I think that is correct. Even if you consider the Crusades as something bad, there is plenty of evidence to argue that the militarization of the church was because of Islam. Most certainly, I would agree that is a very strong case to be made there. Today, it's Qatari cash. 100% Dogbert, Qatari cash. They've bought up governments. They've bought up a lot of the U.S. Political elite. Yeah, let's continue. So that hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. The Protestant betrayal of Europe. So the Protestant-Ottoman alliance. Hungarian Protestant Imre Türkeli resisted Habsburg anti-Protestant policies, of course. But of course, when they write this, I'm paraphrasing or copying some of the text, and of course they want to write those Catholics were bad, right? And we had to do something because look how bad those Catholics are, But they missed the point of, but the Protestants were betraying Europe. They were siding with the enemy. right? Habsburg Emperor Leopold I enforced Catholic conformity. Tokely led rebellions to protect Hungarian Protestant autonomy. Tokely allied with Ottoman Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa for military support. So I'll finish with the next slide after this. He sought Ottoman aid in 1682. Kara Mustafa agreed to weaken Catholic power. So this was initiated by the Protestants. The Battle of Vienna seems here, according to this, to be initiated by the Protestants. The battle that nearly gave Europe to the Muslims was a Protestant initiative. And the Muslims went, okay, this gives us an opportunity to finally take Vienna that we couldn't before. How about you do this militarily, we do that militarily, and we work together to overthrow the Catholics? And the Protestants went, hell yeah, sign us up. 1683, the Ottomans launched a massive attack on the Habsburg Empire, targeting Vienna. Tokely's alliance emboldened the Ottoman ambitions to conquer Europe. Over 100,000 Ottoman troops, a quarter of a million troops, besieged Vienna, exploiting Habsburg divisions, because the Habsburgs were fighting on numerous fronts. The Catholics were fighting numerous fronts against Protestants. The Battle of Vienna. Ottomans nearly overran Europe's Christian heartland. Tokely's forces harassed the Habsburg supply lines, aiding the Ottoman advance. So they were there to make sure that these Ottomans could get to Vienna. So again, betrayal by the Protestants. The Protestant-Ottoman pact, so it's not just like a casual accident, they signed a pact, enabled a Muslim offensive. Tokely's rebellion distracted the Habsburgs, amplifying the Ottoman strength to conquer Europe, because divide and conquer. They were too busy fighting with this guy, so the Ottomans could use that opportunity as a distraction, as a ruse to invade. The outcome, the Polish king, John Sobieski, or Jan III Sobieski, his army crushed the Ottomans and he saved Vienna. Tokely's role showed that the Protestants were dependent on Islamic power, or they would never have survived. Now, Tokely, he leveraged Islamic support for his personal aims, and he was willing to sell out Europe to get his money and power and lands. Now, when your religion is alike, so are your allegiances. I asked this when I discussed with Usama Dakdok the religious overlap between the theology of John Calvin and Islam. When you have shared theological ideas with Muslims, which are antagonistic to Christianity, which are opposite to mainstream Orthodox Christianity, where does your allegiance lie? With the Muslims or with the Christians? When your theological leanings are Muslim, as a Christian, are you loyal to other Christians? Or are you loyal to the Muslims where your core doctrines are Muslim? It's a fair question. I asked it then, and I think we're seeing the answer here. So I'll do this last slide. I'll end here. Hello, Rory. How are you doing? I think the comic book for Thor was Alexander the Great. Okay, interesting. I'll have the police call around in a minute for that comment. Oh my gosh. The British, what's happening in the UK is disturbing. It's Sharia enforcement through the government. Belinda says it's 10 times more likely in the UK than Russia to be arrested for these comments. Yeah. In fact, I mean, I think the UK has arrested something like 20 times more people for comments on social media than have the Russians and the Chinese. Apparently it's insanity. So the Protestants opened the doors of Toledo. It's not Toledo, Europe. Sorry, my bad. Because why are Protestants complaining that the Jews supposedly opened the doors of Toledo, which was a Catholic place, and the Protestants were trying to kill the Catholics anyway? And they complain about that when the Protestants don't seem to want to talk about how they opened the doors of Europe. I'd say you're a bunch of hypocrites for doing that, and obviously anti-Semites too. Let's have a look. This is Wikipedia, but it all seems legitimate. Let's have a look. Skirmish between Hungarian anti-Habsburg Kurk rebels and the Habsburg loyalists. On the political front, the Ottoman Empire had been providing military assistance to the Hungarians. So the Protestant Reformation had nothing to do with Islam. Nothing. And non-Catholic minorities in the Habsburg occupied portions of Hungary. In the years preceding the siege, widespread unrest had grown into open rebellion against Leopold's pursuit of the Counter-Reformation and his desire to suppress Protestantism. In 1681, Protestants and other anti-Habsburg forces led by Imre Tokely were reinforced with a significant military contingent from the Ottomans, who, nothing to do with Islam, of course, who recognized Tokely as king of Upper Hungary. We'll make you the king of Upper Hungary as long as you sell out Europe. And he was like, yeah, no problem. And this is the eastern part of modern-day Slovakia and parts of northeastern Hungary, which he had earlier taken by force from the Habsburgs. We'll let you keep this country if you help us sell out the rest of Europe. And he was like, yeah, sure. This support included explicitly promising the Kingdom of Vienna to the Hungarians if it fell into Ottoman hands. Now, there were 20 years of peace prior to that, but the Hungarians were like, yeah, we don't like peace. We want money. We want lands. We want power. I want to be the king of Vienna. And so, Mr. Ottoman, where do I sign so that we can, wipe out Christianity in Europe and we'll live happily ever after together, Christians and Muslims side by side, Islam and Protestants sitting in a tree, Kissing, or something. Maybe that was the fairy tale he told himself. So then there was another declaration sent by the Grand Vizier Mustafa Pasha on behalf of Mehmed IV. Arrives at the imperial court in Vienna. The next day, the forward march of Ottoman army elements began from Edirne in Rumelia. Ottoman troops reached Belgrade early May. They were joined, their buddies joined them, a Transylvanian army under Prince Mihaly Apafi and a Hungarian force under Imre Tököly. Let me see, the Great Battle of Vienna that saved Europe from the Muslims. Now, we need to rewrite this history a little more accurately. Please tell me if I'm wrong if we call this the Battle of the the Battle of the Europeans against the Muslims and the Protestants. I think that would be a slightly more accurate description of what happened at the Battle of Vienna that saved Europe, that prevented the Ottoman Muslim takeover of Europe. It was the battle of the Catholics on the one side, those evil Catholics who were fighting to defend Europe, against the righteous Muslims and Protestants who follow the Bible only. Because when you follow the Bible only and you're a Lutheran, what you do is you fight on the side of the Muslims to become king and destroy the Catholics and give Europe over to the Muslims. That's what you do, because the Bible alone says that. I'm sure Jesus said it somewhere in the Gospels. They laid siege to Győr, and was the fortress at Győr, and the remaining army of 150,000 moved towards the city of Vienna. Nothing to do with Protestant treason, betrayal, or Islam. Final page. I'll finish this page and we'll call it a day. Let me see if Rory says, Lloyd, I'm a domination Christian. I'm a Bible-believing Christian. The question is, how do you believe in the Bible? What's your authority? What's your authority? Really? If you have a certain view, does your church accept that? Does your church endorse that? It's the large church. Are there 12 people in the church? Or is it your personal opinion? Does that mean you're an opinionated Christian? Because those Unitarians that we spoke of who love Islam, they also follow the Bible. The Protestants who are anti-Trinitarian also follow the Bible. Calvin and Luther called each other heretics. They were giving each other anathemas. They were, dispossessing each other from the church. They were also following the Bible. The Anabaptists, who we'll have a look at the Anabaptists one fine day, who they also followed the Bible. They all disagree with each other. They contradict each other. The only result that comes from Bible only is division, not unity, not truth, contradiction, division, squabbling, splits, schisms. Nothing good has come from sola scriptura. All right, moving on. So let me see. Owen says, I was told that the Protestant Saxons were the emperor's forces to relieve the city verbally abused by the city inhabitants. Okay, I don't understand that. If you can just explain it again, or I'm coming in the middle of the sentence and I don't quite understand the context of what you're saying. Gabriel says, I recently converted to Catholicism from Protestantism, and words cannot describe how mad I've become because of the blatant lies I was fed by Protestants. Thank you for these talks, Lloyd. You're very welcome. Look, I'm angry too. I can tell you I am very angry. I am disturbed. Sometimes I sit here gobsmacked. I can't explain to you. I sit here stunned. I just sit here staring at the screen. I'm like, I can't believe I just read that. It's shocking to me. I mean, it is disturbing to me. Philip says, Gabriel Hernandez, welcome home. Hopefully you are or find your way to traditional parish. Let me see. Yeah, that's a fair question. I just asked it. Under what authority do you claim your interpretation is correct? Under what authority? So I didn't say I was offended. I'm just saying, look, there's a problem. There's a logical problem there. There's clearly a logical problem with that. What folks call the Roman Catholic Church likely really meant the Latin Rite. Catholics have more than 24 rites, not all with Roman canon law traditions. Yeah, but no, Rome in this case is what Martin Luther referred to as the Romanists and so on. That was the seat of power, the seat of the Pope. So that's the seat of authority, which it's had since the days of the New Testament. Dogbert says, as someone from a Protestant background, I have to agree with a lot of what you say. Well, thank you. I spend a lot of time on this. I mean, true, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? But let me finish this one slide. I'll call it a night. And then I got to contact my friend from Germany and see what's happening. So the Protestants opened the doors of Toledo. Sorry, Europe. Doors of Europe. Much, much bigger problem. I've been to Toledo a couple of times. It's a great place. But yeah, the doors of Europe, that's slightly worse. Imre de Curly, 1657 to 1705, was a member of the Evangelical Lutheran Church, because Lutherans are the true Christians, because Luther saved the church from the evil Catholics. After forming an alliance with the Turks, he assisted the Ottoman Empire at the Battle of Vienna in 1683. He led the Turkish cavalry at the Battle of Zenta in 1697. So not just 1683. The guy was up to his tricks 15 years later. He was doing a whole lot of assisting the Ottoman army. He was doing a lot of, shall we call it, treason, betrayal, selling out. A good dhimmi, calling himself a good Christian, saying he's fight. Remember, this is a Bible-believing Christian, Rory. This guy who's selling out Europe to the Muslims was a Bible-believing Christian, a Lutheran of all things. He's following Luther. He's following Jesus and the Bible, not Luther. Good grief, wouldn't do that. No. Luther had nothing to do with the Reformation. He was just Bible-believing, and the Bible told him to sell out as a treasonous scumbag to the Muslims. So he led the Turkish cavalry at the Battle of Zenta in 1697. He refused to surrender to the Habsburg Emperor Leopold I, and he lost his Principality of Upper Hungary. So, of course, the Protestants, were, lieber Turks than Pops, right? Rather Muslim than Catholic, right? So, of course, he gets rewarded by the Muslims. He retires to Galata near Constantinople with large estates granted to him by Mustafa II. Well, I guess when you sell out, the devil looks after his own or whatever. So while Protestants gleefully use the phrase, who opened the gates of Toledo, as a smear against the Jews, it should be pointed out that Protestants literally opened the gates of Europe, of many cities, besides just Toledo, in fact. We can go through a whole bunch of this history, and they opened these gates to Muslims for money, power, and shared ideology, because they're Bible-believing Christians. They followed the Bible. They follow Jesus. They follow the Bible. And Jesus said, sell out your fellow Christians for money. And they said, thank you, Jesus. We will do just that, because they're Bible-believing Christians. The Holy Spirit inspired them, and they can't be wrong. Because when you're inspired by the Holy Spirit, one-to-one, private revelation is what can I say? And why are the Protestants who aided and abetted Muslim conquerors, I ask, complaining about an attack on Catholics in Toledo that they themselves were undermining, betraying, and attacking, often on behalf of and with the Muslims, in coordination with the Muslims? One has to ask. These are hypocrites, and I think they need to do a little bit of soul searching. I will stop here. I'm at slide 92. This goes up to slide 109 or slide 110, so I've got about 18 more slides. I'll do one more show on this, and I'll finish this. The Protestants also opened the door of heresies that the church had shut for 1,000 years, and that is true. Let me see what Oratex says. So I will stop here now. Let me just unshare that. Let me just check the last of the comments. So, well, thank you, Rory. Let's see. Oratex says, I had to kind of fudge because of the character limit. When the emperor's forces came, there was a Protestant Saxon contingent in the force. They fought in the battle, but afterwards the inhabitants of Vienna, I see now, insulted them in some sources, and I could not understand why. And that would be if they fought for the city. But with what you show about Hungarian Protestants, I can see why the people were mad at the Protestants. Yes, because they betrayed Europe. This was a systematic, organized, ongoing, consistent, coordinated betrayal of Europe by Protestants. because that's what Jesus would want. Because the Protestants looked at this and said, what would Jesus do? And they said Jesus would sell out to the Muslims for money. And they said, okay, yeah, that's what the Bible says. It's Bible alone, that's the message the Holy Spirit has laid on my heart. And we need to screw over those Catholics. That's the holy cause against. This is the Protestant crusade against Catholicism and their brother Muslims. Because Queen Elizabeth did say she's their sister. We are theologically similar. We have more in common with Protestants and Muslims, as they were writing, officially writing this, than with those evil Catholics. And so let's destroy the Catholics, and let's live happily ever after, Protestants and Muslims side by side, in unity and brotherly love. And I would think that's a true story. True story. So no different today in the Protestant EU. So, and I mentioned from my heart, remember the Lord said the church will triumph over the gates of hell. And I believe that is true. I think that it actually literally says that. And H.M. Fogg says, here we go again, Euro. So guys, I'll end here. Thank you very much for your time. I do sincerely hope that what I've presented here is a credible history of what's happened, a credible interpretation of the history, the actions. There's some articles that are so long, there are papers, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages that have had to be summarized here, presented here. But I think that, as I said 2 years ago when I got banned from various channels for saying certain things, I called Protestantism a crime. I called it a crime at a national level. I called Protestantism a betrayal of Christian culture, and that it was a self-serving political crime, a theocratic menace to Europe. And of course, I was let's just say, unhoused from various locations and not invited back. But I hope I've proven my case. We've got another 18 slides to go, and I'll finish this next time. But I hope that I have presented what looks like a credible case, not that of a raving lunatic who is making up stories about Martians. And these Protestants are traitors because Jesus said to love one another, and love and treachery do not go hand in hand. And I agree with you, Rory. That is a very well said statement. Yes. So yeah, Satan works in mysterious ways. The circumstances, yeah. So guys, I will call it a night here. Thank you all very much for your time. I do appreciate you being here. Sorry for being late. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Good night and